Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And Romana and I are in for the second episode of essentially the prep diaries slash prep file. So, hello, my G. How are we today?
Good, all good. I have a very ironic story being the topic of our with what the topic of this particular episode is about. Bowel movements and poo on prep. So literally about 20 minutes ago, I've gone for a wee. Well, that ended up being a poop because prep, unpredictable, high days, unpredictable. And I had my phone in my shorts pockets. And as I've pulled my shorts up, my phone has fallen out of said pocket and into the pan that, yes, had feces in it.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a reason I go with Samsung Galaxy because they're waterproof and apparently poop proof too. Because as evidence, I've been quite nicely messaging you backwards and forwards since that happened. So
Yeah.
yeah, that
Well,
was that was fun.
there's so many random things that happen in prep, and I actually, when I made the artwork, I was like, we're gonna call it GI on prep for the artwork, and I was like, way back when, I didn't even realize what GI was. So I'm glad that you've introed it as that because people might think, what's GI? But essentially, gastrointestinal intestinal guys, and it is as
Yep.
well. This is why we want to cover this subject early on. It's certainly something that over the years you learn more and more about. And I feel like when you sort of first get into bodybuilding, you're asked on your check-in form or whatever by your coach, how's your digestion and this type of stuff. And I think you could easily be like, what do you mean, how's my digestion? Because you sort of think digestion is maybe the eating part, and it's termed in different ways, isn't it?
So, and I am not an expert when it comes to nutrition and digestion. As there are people like Hilly Doc out there who are actual nutritionists, dietitians, that sort of thing. I have a knowledge from my medical background and an understanding of the anatomy from my medical background. And so essentially it's from here through to your asshole
Yeah.
is your digestive or gastrointestinal tract. Your digestive system starts with your mouth, ends up with your bumhole, for no other better word. And when we are in a dieting scenario and we are on reduced food, there is an aspect of the digestive system called peristalsis, and it's basically the smooth muscle contractions that go on from your esophagus essentially all the way through again to your arsehole. There's going to be a lot about arseholes on this pod.
Boo.
And that smooth muscle contraction will speed up and slow down depending on how much food we do or do not eat. So when we are in a deficit and we are on low food, your body naturally slows down because it hasn't got as much to work with. So that can be one of the causations, that and the reduced food volume itself, as to why, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but on prep constipation is a thing.
Yeah.
And the unpredictability of actually having a bowel movement. And I think we started, or my sort of thought process around doing this particular pod was, I don't know if anyone else out there gets it, but it's pre-check-in poop anxiety
Yes.
when you've got your check-in the next day and you're like, but I'm not going to the toilet until about 11 o'clock. And it's my coach wants to, a lot of coaches will have a cutoff of when they want their clients to check in. And it's that kind of anxiety around, will I actually have a bowel movement? Because we're still also emotionally attached to the little number on the scales and how that is impacted by whether you have or haven't had a bowel movement. And it's like I can lose 3 pounds from a bowel movement if it's a good one. And
Sure.
that how that affects the fluctuations in your weight and how that can have certain fuckwittery with your mind when you're in a deficit and you're so attached to seeing those drops on the scales. And that's when, in my opinion, a coach should be able to step in and say, look, regardless of what the scales are telling me, you're looking like this. So therefore, the scales for my clients, I always remind them that the scales are a metric that we're heading in the right direction, that they are not the defining factor to what changes that I do or don't make as a coach. And I have to remind myself that as an athlete as well, because yeah,
Yeah, for
it is a lot.
sure. Like I often put it on my I have these little moments on my stories on Instagram where I'm like, this is not Weight Watchers, guys, this is physique development.
Yeah,
And again, like you say, as the person doing the bodybuilding for ourselves, we certainly get in our own head at times. That's why we need to voice note each other. But, there's so many examples that I have in my mind. Even a recent one with the photo shoot. I didn't go for 2 days. I tried the Ducalax, just the gels that we've spoken about, and I didn't go on the photo shoot day. And I was like, oh, and I almost had these moments of like, I want to put it in the description of the post to say no bowel movement for 2 days. So there is, and you start thinking, oh my God, are people going to think that I'm blown out? Are people going to be looking at my midsection? And it becomes this like narrative in your head where you're like, well, if I had lost, if I had been to the toilet, I might have been a little bit less on the scale. But you look, very much the same, but you just get that lower abdominal, a little bit of bloat in there. And it's for sure for me, it tests my narrative because obviously when I'm doing a shoot, I'm like, oh, I wish I could have had, a bowel movement on the day. And then the next day, the stress drop off. Oh, I go 3 times. Brilliant, guys. And it's like, fucking hell. But it's such an example of, you know, like you say, the sort of poo anxiety, as it were, it is because when you've got that one check-in day per week, obviously as we ramp up and we can do multiple ones when you're getting leaner, etc. But it does feel, it can feel a bit like, oh God. And then you're like, I used to think, well, my previous coaches, they were talking about the scale weight quite a lot on reflection. So I would be like trying to almost do my check-in and then make excuses I haven't been to the toilet because I think, oh, they're going to drop my food if my scale weight hasn't. Blah, 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 blah. And that type of thing is real. Like people listening, I'm sure there's going to be people walking along going, shit, that happens to me.
really shit. It's I mean, it's another perspective as well when your coach is your partner.
Mm,
And like Dan and I are relatively open, but when it comes to bowel movements, like I mean, he'll have a shit with the door open, but for me, it's still a very private, personal time where I feel as a female, I don't need him involved in that aspect of my life. So he'll come into the he'll come into the bedroom and I will literally just quietly shut the door if I am trying to have a shit. It's like if I'm having a wee, the door stays open and we'll carry on chatting. But it's just a so it's yeah, having that conversation with your coach and explaining, this was pre bowel movement. That's what I get my clients to do. And it just adds context as to why the scale weight might not have shifted. And then it's reminding them to take them back to, but look, this is how your physique is. And I'll do a little comparison. It's, and then add the layer on top of that is show day.
yeah.
And that kind of apprehension of am I actually going to be able to have a bowel movement? Because I think everyone has a minor or massive fear out there of being on stage and needing a shit.
Yeah.
Like it's
It's
the fear is
real.
real.
Yeah, like the episode we did on sex on prep, my client D listened. She said, "Oh, I heard about your story on show day when you had to say to Matt, like, did I go to the toilet?" And and he was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh my God," and she was laughing. But there is certainly the thing is, I feel like, it becomes more and more obvious the leaner you get per se when you haven't been to the toilet, but also you're gonna look when you're looking in the mirror or whatever, you're gonna look straight at potentially that area. So it exacerbates it even more. You haven't been, and it's like also I feel like you're probably similar to me. It's it's like it's really hard to not feel uncomfortable there and not zone in on it when you haven't been for a couple of days or whatever. And then it's like, am I stressing myself out at the same time as then the body being under stress and not being able to go?
I get I feel sluggish.
Yes.
Yeah, it just makes me yeah. It literally I've had it mainly at the beginning of this. No, when was it? 2 weeks ago, because I had a high day last weekend, and the high days do tend to help push everything along. but there was 2 weeks where I didn't have any high days for those 2 weeks. And getting towards the back end of that 2 weeks, I'm doing my treadmill steps or I'm walking the dogs, and I'm like, I just feel like weighed down
Yeah.
and lethargic and yeah, uncomfortable. And then it's like you start doing your cardio and you're thinking, am I going to have to? Because I don't like to break. Once I've started, I don't like to break.
Same.
And if I have to go to the toilet, it's like, oh, fuck's sake. It plays in my head. Then going back to the beginning of the start, you've got an hour's cardio, you've done 30 minutes, and then you need to go to the toilet, and then you're back at zero again. Whereas there's something about tipping over halfway through your cardio and seeing and thinking to yourself, right, I've got less and less. I've done the chunk of it, but if I have to break and that counts, the clock starts again. It's like, oh,
No, I feel you. You start the mind games, don't you? Of like, so when I've got 20 minutes on the stepper, I'm like, right, I've done 2 minutes, so I've got to do nine more of those. Then I've done 4 minutes, 6 minutes. Then I get to like 16 minutes, and I've got two, and I'm like, da, 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 da. And when we're talking about the bowel movements and being uncomfortable, I feel like as well this transfers into even last week's pod around sex. Feeling uncomfortable there also, when you do, I find when I do actually go, so maybe it's been the third day at the moment, it's like the third day it does generally speaking happen. I actually feel quite tired after. Do you get that?
I don't. I know. Actually, I feel the opposite.
Oh,
I feel more energized because having just been and dropped my phone down the toilet, and I am on a high day. It's my second high day. I do feel more energized, but I trained legs very early this morning. I think I started my session at just past 8 o'clock, which is unusual for me, but it's because of being on a high day, trying to get the food in and trying to train before it got too hot. Um, and I'd had a partial. I know, like it's normally about 3 times is after a high day is my standard. So I'd had my first time before I left home. Um, Eaten my pre, done a little warm up. I'm in my session, and I was doing single leg hip press, and I've done my left leg, and I'm like, oh fuck, I think I need the toilet. And I was literally like trying to gauge whether I needed to really go or whether I could do my right leg before going to the toilet. And I did manage it, but I then moved on to the leg extension. And then I actually voice note it. I put this in the voice note. And I've put the weight on the leg extension, my bags on the leg extension. I've done a set and I've gone, right, now I do need the toilet. So I've headed off. And the toilet in the public gym I train at's a little way away from the gym floor. So it does take a little while, especially if you are having a shit. It takes longer than having a piss, let's be honest. And I've come back and somebody has moved my bag, moved the weight off the machine, and I looked at him. He was like, "Oh, is this your stuff?" I was like, "Yes." I've just been to the toilet. He was like, "Oh, well, you're welcome to jump in with me if you want." I was just like, in my head, my prep brain is going, "You cheeky fuck. Like, how can you not get that somebody was using that? There's a bag there with weight on it. There's a drinks bottle right next to it. It's clearly in use. And you've literally to move my bag out of the way to actually get in the machine. That's how obvious it was that somebody was using it.
mm.
And to then just say, well, you're welcome to jump in with me if you want. It's like, well, actually, it should be the other way around, mate. It should be me saying to you, you can jump in with me. And I just looked at him, I was like, it's fine. I'll use the lying hand curl. And then the thing that got me, it's like I'm 5 weeks out from a show and still ended up with more weight on the leg extension than he was using for his top set.
Oh, me and Matt were training the other day, and like obviously I'm a smaller than you, man, and from a muscular standpoint, bikini girl. And it's really cool because I'm at that point where I've got some striations in my delts and shit, and like I love doing the
Yeah, I can
dumbbell
see it
lat
popping.
raises, and yeah, I'm like oh, and I love doing the biceps, and I can see, and where I'm flatter now, it's like I need to be lifting weight to really see it properly, and I can hit some poses or
Yeah.
whatever. But there was these two younger lads, and I was lifting more than them on bicep curls, and Matt was like, "Oh my God, this is hilarious." I was like, "Stop it, John." I was like, "I feel like I've got more muscle than them, and they're male."
It's, um, it is an odd feeling because it's being a more muscular and having gone from not being as muscular to quite quickly developing. Although I am covering it up with shameless plug to SPB here,
Oh,
who surprised me with this awesome tee and the most comfiest socks ever. My little prep feet, oh my God, they were like clouds this morning walking around the gym because I've lost all body fat on my feet. So
I-
thank you so much, CJ, for the surprise yesterday. It was
yeah.
fucking wicked. Um, and I've forgotten the point I was going at now because I was shamelessly plugging. But yeah, oh, that was it. Yeah. Being of the going from being not so muscular to being very muscular and the kind of perception of people in the gym, it can be quite an interesting dynamic. I used to get it more in CrossFit where a guy would look at what I've got on the bar and then try and match it and fail miserably. And it still happens now as well. It's just it's ego. Just drop the ego and lift what you can.
Yeah, for sure. Talking of CJ as well and heavily muscled females, one of well, she calls her a bodybuilding mum, but Sue, who listens to the pod, I'm going to plug her as well. She's stacked, and she competed when CJ was here last, and she was showing me photos. She was like, she loves the pod. Like Sue, I think Sarah engaged with her on social media, and she was like, "Oh, she sees all of you girls doing what you're doing," and I'm like, "She's part of the tribe." And again, it's like the credit to heavily muscled females. I know we're sort of going off topic here, but we actually had a bit of that backlash on a reel the other day, didn't we? With a comment of some fucktard saying about and it's just like.
Men in makeup.
Yeah, I'm just like, and when I did the story, when I posted the one with Tony, and straight away it's like, if steroids are abused, they're negative, and it's like that's the point in doing a podcast, bro. Like we're talking about the side effects, but you just get so many
Mm.
people, and this is part of the podcast as well, right? Like obviously I'm not heavily muscled divisions, but it's actually giving a voice to women that are fucking jacked and wearing that shit as a badge of honor, you know?
I I feel a little bit of satisfaction because I can't even remember what the comment was, but some guy commented on one of my posts, basically effectively trying to misgender me. And I think I said something along the lines of, "I'm so pleased that you took the time out of your day from trying to find your micro penis to actually, comment on my post to try and make yourself feel better by making me feel bad. I really hope that worked for you because obviously you needed that in your life." And I have great satisfaction in that he deleted his comment.
Oh, it is so it's so wild that people do that anyway. Like you say, take time out of their day. And I always think, and I've always said this to you right from the start of when we met, like how hard it is to get a physique like yours. And then people need to take time in their day. But also, when we look at this, right, like this prep series we're doing, we're talking about sex on prep, GI, things like this. Now, would that derail people from talking about stuff if they're getting comments on Instagram of a detrimental nature when actually they could be sharing to help people in the community like we're trying to do, you know?
It's it's odd because I yesterday was a high day as well, and I went for Five Guys, and I popped into the petrol station to fuel up on the way. And the woman behind the desk has seen me a couple of times, but I've always been covered up. But yesterday was so hot, I had a vest top on, and she was like, "Oh, have you just come from the gym or something? You're jacked." And she was very complimentary, but I find that really hard to deal with,
Mm.
like
It's
what to
comments.
say. I was just like, "Ah, thank you. Can I just pay, please?" I
Yeah.
just I don't, I find the positive comments equally as difficult to manage as the negative ones, and I don't know why, because I in my head I'm just rocking around being me. And I forget that actually I don't look like everybody else and that I am going to get comments. And I was sat there eating Five Guys on my own because Dan wasn't on a high day, watching my iPad, sat outside so I could vape. And I noticed like families looking at me and they're sat there with their coronas and the kids running around and stuff like that. And it is an armor that you wear all the time and you can't take it off. And it both the positive and the negative can be quite exhausting managing that. Um, yeah, but yeah, we are digressing a little bit from poop.
Yeah, we are.
Let's
We are.
should we go back to poop? And we you mentioned Dulcolax
Yeah.
as being so that's one thing to use to help alongside that. And I've actually found through because I've had to with shift working, I used to get a lot of constipation as well. And I'm sure other shift workers out there will resonate. You're disrupting your internal body clock, and your body doesn't know which way up it is. So you do end up with either constipation or diarrhea, bloating, acid reflux.
Yeah.
Basically, it's very, very similar to the stuff that happens on prep. So I have tried all manner of different types of things. And interestingly enough, the most effective thing I found is a couple of dried apricots.
I remember when you said that, I was like, oh, yeah.
You have them with a meal, make sure you're near a toilet because guaranteed, sometimes it can be as quick as 10 minutes, sometimes it can be an hour. Depending how bunged up I am, it can be overnight, but often it's more effective than any actual laxative. I don't know what it might just be a me thing.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not because I have recommended it to clients and it's worked as well. And Dan, I
Mm.
don't know what it is about them. And yeah, like to start off with, Dan was like, but that's not on your plan. It's like, but look at the calories, look at the macros of an apricot.
And
It's
look at,
like if I drop 4 grains of rice, I've mitigated that apricot that I've eaten. And actually, the discomfort that you get from constipation and how it can negatively impact your steps, your cardio, your posing, your training session with that feeling of being bunged up, having a little bit of extra carb to actually boost along how quickly food transit goes through your GI tract is the positives outweigh the slight increase of carb that you're eating, in my opinion.
yeah, for sure. I have done a pod about this, but I did used to use Dukalax. Like when I first got exposed to Dukalax was my first show, and I'd never like before bodybuilding. I just was a normal person, however normal is in this life. And the first time I used the Dukalax was the liquid one, which is quite invasive. So I used it for a show, and I was like, bloody hell, like what the fuck is this? It was like my insides were coming out. And then consequently, each show it was the same. So obviously, I've done 7 seasons, and over the time, I then started to utilize it more in preps. And when I did longer preps, I'd start basically, I got almost addicted to using the liquid because I wouldn't go to the toilet for so long. So when I came off the back of my last prep, I was like, I've got an issue here, and I'm happy to talk about it because there might be people listening that have similar things. We've got addictive personalities, guys. You know, certain things happen. So I had to like wean myself off of it, and I knew I'd be doing the longer off season. So I'd start by, having a few days, etc. Then it got to the point where I started using psyllium husks, and that was a good effect, generally speaking. Not as much as Dukalax, of course. And then I titrated into using like Senna tea, so I got this like poo tea, and started using that. And then now it got to like probably that week 9 that we spoke about on the previous pod where the diet started to kick with fatigue and stuff, and now it's sort of every 2 to 3 days. So there's certainly merit as well in, as we've just spoken about, Dukalax as like a medical remedy, as it were, or foods or supplements or herbal teas, stuff like this. I know a lot of people say have a coffee, and I'm like, coffee does fuck all for me.
English coffee does fuck all. American coffee, my God. It's like
Ooh.
when it was Chicago, we found this really nice little coffee place. And luckily there was a Target right next to it. So we'd get our morning coffee, and then we'd go to Target and get whatever we needed for that day. And thank God Target has a toilet, but you have to ask for the PIN code because it was literally it. This coffee was so strong that 10 minutes, and you're like, oh fuck! It's literally like you know how much of a French bulldog person I am. I was walking back from the coffee place on my own, and there was these Frenchies coming towards me, and we didn't have Rogue at that time, so I was like Frenchy crazy, and I needed to go so badly I couldn't even bring myself to bend down to say hello to these Frenchies because I was like, if I move in any way other than walking straight forward with my cheeks clenched, I am going to shit myself in the middle of the street of Chicago. It was that bad.
It can come on quick when you, especially when you haven't been for a few days. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's gonna happen, and it's literally like there's no pre-warning. I think as well, like you were saying at the start with essentially the digestive tract and what happens in a prep, I feel like it almost ties into a bit with, the cycle, the menstrual cycle, and what happens there. Essentially, your body is trying to conserve energy, isn't it? And it's like
Yeah.
slowing down, but then it can be this, like you've just described there, you're suddenly like, well, shit, excuse the pun. I need the toilet. And then it's like, oh my God, where do I go? And it's funny, isn't it? Because when I actually try and attribute this to certain trends and data and pretty much the things we're talking about, I'm like, a lot of the time it interlinks with a stress drop off. So if I, in the mornings, if I've got a quieter morning, which isn't that often, but if I was to sit down for a bit and have my coffee, sometimes it happens. So the stress side of things as well, like you said with shift work, etc. It's difficult when you've got shitloads to do in a prep, innit?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're busting for, well, it's like, on the one hand, you're like, please God, can I just go for a shit? But on the other hand, you might be mid dog walk and you're going, please God, do I not need make me not need. It's like we live in the middle of nowhere, so freedom wheeze occur frequently.
Sure, I mean,
But on prep, there's also been freedom shits.
well, if
It's like,
you need to go.
yeah, it's just it's one of those things. Like, what's the alternative? And I would rather, if it has to be in the middle of a field, but the relief you get from actually having gone
I would
is,
go. I would
yeah,
I would 100% go. Something actually just sprang to my mind as well. Another internal thing, obviously we find our own methods and stuff when we've been doing it for years. We just do these things. But what I tend to do is in the mornings, it's like a little ritual. And now it doesn't work as much at this point. Obviously I'm like nearly week 16, just for context for the listeners. But what I do is when I wake up in the morning, I place my hands on my stomach and I'm trained in Reiki, you see, so I do Reiki on myself. Then I do some like mobilization of my knees either side. I then like hug my knees into my chest. And sometimes that even stimulates a bit of
yeah.
bowel movement. But if I was to then jump out of bed and blah, 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 it's like a turtle. I'm not coming out now. So there's little things like that as well. Sometimes if again time allows and you've got a bit of time and you are a bit it's uncomfortable, obviously things like tucking your knees in, but there's little things that you can sort of start to incorporate where you can be like, okay, what can I try here? So yeah, it's just a little tip as well. Random, but it works sometimes.
I'm giggling to myself because when was it? Friday morning, I wasn't due to check in, and Rogue, being a puppy, she'll still have some accidents overnight. So I'm clearing up puppy piss. And the easiest way of doing that, because quite often it's under the kitchen table, is to get into the squat position. And if you think when you go, I don't know if it's so much now, but when I was in school, way back when, like fucking 25 years ago now, oh my God, we went on a school trip to France, and they had literally, there weren't toilets, it was like holes that you squat over, And there's a reason for that. It's because it's the most ergonomically efficient way to open your bowels, is that squatting position. So I'm under the table clearing up puppy piss, wiping down the floor in the squat position. And it's like, oh my God, I need to go. And I went, and yeah, I was like, message Dan was asleep at this point. I was taking the dogs out for a walk. I was like, you may want me to check in when I get back. I'm £3 lighter than I was Wednesday. So between Monday and Friday, I lost £6. And yeah, it was that was felt that.
What a moment.
He was doing my check. He's woken up, read my message, and he's like, yeah, check in. Because I was
Well,
£3 down again just through Thursday, from Wednesday to Friday.
it's
It's
certainly
yeah.
it's because if you do your, go for a wee, do your weigh in for your spreadsheet or whatever you send to your coach, and then you go to the toilet. I don't know if people would even think about it, but generally speaking, maybe they would. But you go back on the scales, don't you? If you go to the toilet, then it's like, oh, something's happened here, and then you can go back on, and it, like you say, 2, 3 pounds can go. It is wild, isn't it?
I won't. I try to check in completely fasted.
Yeah,
So
same.
if I haven't had a bowel movement and I need to do my check-in video for Dan, I won't have had any water if I haven't had a bowel movement. And that's the kicker that really fucks me up, because the less water you have, the less likely you are to have a bowel movement. But it's like I don't want to drink water in case I have a bowel movement, because I want a clear reflection from the scales.
Yeah.
And it's just, I even have to, as a pro, I have to remind myself that it's not about that number on the scales. And I know Dan can see that I'm leaner, so it's kind of irrelevant. But even I still have a hang up on it. But thinking back to going back to the trying not to shit yourself on stage, something that's just popped into my head. So it was show day at Emprov 2023, and Tom was still coaching me at the time. Um, and it was right, have some jam. And I hadn't had jam for what, we were mid-June. I hadn't had jam for like months. And the sucrose from that, literally, I had a little bit of jam on a rice cake and the world fell out my bottom.
Yeah, because
So
jam is
it's stuff
very
like that as well.
jam is used, isn't it? Did you have it with, was it pineapple? Is that what? Yeah.
Yeah. That as well. The fructose in that. That was that was the Olympia, um, where my brain had completely left the building. And I was so much of a space cadet that, because Dan wasn't allowed backstage, there were no coaches allowed backstage, and there was no phone signal, but he had given me instructions via WhatsApp, but I didn't even think to look at my phone. I just kept eating the pineapple. And we've done our comparison, the first initial look at where you go out in alphabetical order. So I've done the bit where I've got Natalia one side, I've got Sarah the other side. Brick Walker's there, Emily Schubert. It's like, fuck me. There's me, Billy, no mates, like first Olympia on stage with two Miss Olympias and two top five, top 10 Olympians. So we've done that, and then had another little bit of pineapple, and we're in the lineup to go and do our individual presentations. And there was about three competitors in front of me, and I was like, I could feel my guts going, the gurgle
Yeah.
and that pressure feeling that you get. And I said to the dude that was backstage, I was like, I really need the toilet. Have I got time? It's like, you've got roughly 3 minutes. I literally had to leg it, do the deed, and run back via the tanning people going, can you just check I haven't got any splashback, please?
That's something I covered in the ebook, the splashback thing, because when you first do a show, you're like, oh my God, the world's ended, and then you're like, oh, they just touch you up and it's fine. But when you
Big
talk about
tip.
What?
Big tip. If you are trying, well, either a piss or a shit, and you're hovering,
Cup.
toilet paper, like in the pan, so you're basically weeing or shitting on the toilet paper, it just absorbs and you don't get the splashback. You have to put quite a fair amount in there, but it does work.
Just making a little bed for my.
Little wee bed.
Yeah, I love it. And then
The
also
tanners,
you can use a cup, can't like a plastic reuse and do
shiwis.
yeah. Or a
I I used to get standard ambulance service issue shiwis, and I tell you, I'd rather just squat.
Mm,
Like
mm.
the margins of error using a shiwi, it's just like it's not the same as like men pissing from their cocks. Let's be honest.
That's
Like
so easy.
that it's not watertight.
Oh, for sure. So many bloody stories on this episode. Where
Yeah.
like, imagine if we'd listened to this before we got into bodybuilding. We'd be like, "Who are these fucking batshit crazy people? This sounds crazy." And we're like, "This is normal."
I think though, thinking back, it can apply to everyday life because even if you're not a bodybuilder, you still get like elements of constipation and needing to go for a wee in inconvenient places.
Mm.
I remember I was stuck on standby for like 6 hours waiting for police for a mental health patient. So we're just stuck in the ambulance in the middle of nowhere, needing a wee. And this was at, oh, it wasn't the middle of nowhere, it was the middle of London. If it was the middle of nowhere, I would have just gone
Freedom.
like by a hedge or something like that. But it's in a London at like 3 a.m. There's still people wandering around. You can't just find a convenient alleyway to have a. So I made myself a shiwi from, everyone would have seen it in on like ER or whatever, the bag valve masks, the masks that go over the head. So I took the mask off and then this tubing and I attached it to a clinical waste bag and I literally, because there was no other option because you couldn't leave the standby point. Like it was that strict. It was like you have to stay there until the police, but you don't know when the police are coming. And you speak to the control room and go, "We really need the toilet. Can we not just nip?" No, you got to wait. It's like, but this is a basic human need.
Yeah, we are desperate. We are desperate. We're sleep deprived. We're doing shift work, and now I need a wee. Please help me. That
Yeah,
reminds me of when Wendy said at the seminar about how she used to hide cooked chicken in her vest when she was a policewoman. I'd imagine there's plenty of wild stories if people listen and they're in the emergency services as well. Lots of things that come up like you couldn't make this up.
little thing would be, I just need to go and get something from the ambulance, and it would normally be food.
I love that. I love that. Now, next one. Do you think we could do around potentially food relationship and hunger
Yeah,
management like that? I think that would be
yeah,
a nice sort of sequel to the ones we've done so far because, of course, that's a hot topic and it feeds in nicely to GI in a certain way.
yeah. It does.
And just to let you guys know some insight for the next couple of episodes that are going to be finishing off May 2025, we've actually got two episodes based around trauma. So I wanted to give you a little update into where we are heading as a podcast, as a tribe. Now, if you haven't already signed up to the newsletter, I do put in the newsletter what's coming the following month. And I do that monthly just to keep you updated on everything that's going on with the podcast. So things like the free photo shoot that's happening in June, different things with the seminar, things I'm doing with the girls, anything like that goes into the newsletter and of course the webinars as well. So if you do want to sign up for that, then let me know, give me a message on Instagram, send me your email address, and that will give you updates. And I hope you're enjoying the new series with Romana. Of course, we are bringing all of the stories about prep, and I hope that you enjoy the two episodes coming up over the next 2 weeks. I look forward to speaking to you all real soon, and of course, enjoy this episode.